peeps. You're listening to She's My Cherry Pie, the baking podcast from the Cherry Bombe Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jessie Sheehan. I'm a baker, recipe developer, and cookbook author, and my 4th book is coming out this fall. Each Saturday, I'm hanging out with the sweetest bakers around and taking a deep dive into their signature bakes. My guest today is Lyndsay Sung, the baker behind Coco Cakeland, Instagram and blog. Lyndsy's cakes are whimsical creations featuring bright colors and playful piping. She released her 2nd cookbook, Plant Cakes, in 2023, and it's filled with approachable plant-based baking recipes. Lyndsay joins me today to chat about her Funfetti Cake with Swiss meringue buttercream and birthday cake crumbles. I've always been a huge fan of sprinkles, and Funfetti cakes are some of my faves. I loved learning more about Lyndsay and her journey in plant-based baking, so stay tuned for our chat. If you'd like to follow along, you can find today's recipe at cherrybombe.com. Thank you to Grappa Nonnino for supporting today's show. Grappa is a traditional Italian spirit made by distilling pomace, the skin, seeds, and stems of grapes left over from the winemaking process. Generations have loved to sip grappa or use it in cocktails, and some even use grappa as an ingredient in baked goods and desserts. I've used bourbon, rum, and amaretto before, but never grappa. So the folks at Grappa Nonnino challenged me to create some special treats with their award-winning grappa varietals. I made a chocolate budino with Nonnino's Monovitigno Chardonnay grappa. The varietal's notes of bread, vanilla, and pastry paired so well with the chocolate. Nonnino's Monovitigno Merlot grappa, with its notes of rose petal and cherry and its fruity finish, was the perfect addition to my ricotta cake with strawberries. A trifle is always a showstopper, so I made a raspberry trifle, but swapped out the traditional sherry for Grappa Nonnino Monovitigno Moscato. This varietal's floral, sage, thyme, and vanilla flavors were an ideal complement to the tart raspberries and sweet mascarpone cream. Nonnino has been distilling grappa since 1897 and has been led by generations of amazing women, from Silvia Nonnino, Italy's first female master distiller, to Silvia's 3 granddaughters, who run the distillery today. Keep an eye on my Instagram, Jessie Sheehan Bakes, to learn and see just how I use Grappa Nonnino in my baked goods and desserts and to get the recipes. You can also learn more about Grappa Nonnino at grappanonnino.it. Peeps, have you heard the news? Cherry Bombe's first ever Jubilee Wine Country is happening in Napa Valley on October 26th and 27th. It'll be a weekend filled with great wine, winemakers, beautiful food, seasonal produce, conversation, connection, and California. Passes are now available. To learn more and snag a pass, visit cherrybombe.com. Let's check in with today's guest. Lyndsay! So happy to have you on She's My Cherry Pie and to chat vegan funfetti cake with you and so much more.
Oh, thank you so much, Jessie, for having me. I'm very excited.
Yay! So you are a self-taught baker. You didn't even start baking till you were 30. And you're a cookbook author, you're a punk rock musician, you're a cat lover, you're a mom, photographer, cancer survivor, and I'm just going to say, because I speak from experience, you are an all-round good time.
Oh, well, thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
I guess I am all those things. Wow.
So I wondered if we could start with maybe an early sweets memory of yours. I know you didn't do a lot of baking when you were little, but is there a memory you recall, maybe something you ate rather than made, maybe something that was beautifully or creatively decorated that you remember?
As a kid, we would have lots of big celebrations and dinners and stuff, often go out to like a Chinese restaurant for dinner or go to somebody's house for an auntie's or uncle's birthday celebration. And there'd always be, a myriad of desserts. Like being Chinese Canadian, there would be sort of a mishmash of like Western and Asian dessert, I guess. I had this memory of going to like a Chinese restaurant for somebody's birthday party. And of course, for dessert, there's always like either a plate of cut up oranges, which is very, not what like a little kid really wants to eat, or dessert soup, which is, oftentimes it would be like red bean soup. So there'd be like chunks of beans in there. Again, you want ice cream or something. So my cousins and I would just very brattily start like a little Dairy Queen chant. Like we'd be like, DQ, DQ. All of a sudden we'd be out of there and we'd go get like socks or sundaes or something.
I love that. And so, I love DQ so much. And
Oh my gosh, yes.
I read that you actually were hoping that your first job could be, or maybe you're still hoping this will be your job, a cake decorator at Dairy Queen.
Yes, I love looking at, like, when I go to DQ and I open that freezer, I just admire just the cute little whatever the person behind the counter has been up to, just with their gel decorating and weird piping and big beer mug with like a frothy head or whatever. There's something charming about it.
I love that.
Yeah, and I've always loved like a soft serve swirl. Maybe about 20 years ago, I wanted to open a soft serve place called Swirly. I even went on like a tour of Taylor's soft serve machine factory and did all this research and stuff on how to pull a perfect soft serve. I just love the look of it.
And am I right in thinking there wasn't actually a lot of sweets making or baking happening in your childhood home?
So my mom was awesome at putting food on the table and cooking and stuff, but that was not like her forte, baking or cooking specifically. But I do remember like a very crispy, dare I say, almost burnt chocolate chip cookie that would make its way into our home. There was always like Oreos or some sort of store-bought treat, but we would only be allowed like literally one. I grew up in a fruit and vegetables household. My dad worked in fruit and vegetable wholesale, so we had a lot of fruit and veggies. And my mom had more of a health food focus a little bit for treats. But then my grandma was the one that gave me my KitchenAid mixer. She was the one that sort of was a baker and would make lots of cookies and different treats and stuff. And I did a little bit of baking with her.
So when you first did jump into baking, when you're a bit older, you baked your way through Martha Stewart's Baking Handbook, which is literally one of my favorite, most used books, like obsessed with that book. So I had a couple of questions. How did you pick that book? And did you like literally bake everything? Like you did one of those things where you started on page 1 and kept going?
I didn't literally bake every single thing, but I did learn all the principles of baking cakes, cookies, scones through that book. And even like Swiss meringue buttercream, first time I'd ever attempted that. That I got it was either a bridal shower gift or a birthday gift from my sister.
Yeah. So all this baking through Martha's book kind of led you to a little cottage cupcake business out of your kitchen.
Exactly.
It also led to your blog, Coco Cake Land. And I wanted you to tell us about the Very Hungry Caterpillar cake, which, first of all, Very Hungry Caterpillar is one of my favorite Eric Carle books ever.
Oh my gosh, yes.
I mean, I love them all, but it's so good. I know that this cake virally catapulted you, or as you like to say, caterpillared you.
I had my little cottage cupcake and cake biz out of my home like many years ago and just got an order for like a first birthday cake. They wanted that theme and I was like, okay, cute. And just kind of came up with the head and then the cupcakes just doing this big sort of rainbowy, movement. It had a lot of movement, the cake. And then I did like a 2-tone buttercream for the green frosting. And then I actually had the chocolate sprinkles, like the long skinny ones. And I actually used a pair of tweezers and I just plopped them into it like little hair bits. So it had a lot of detail and it was very charmingly cute. And maybe the start of like sort of a kawaii vibe for cocoa cake and that type of thing. And I took some crappy photos of it because I just had like a point and shoot digital camera back then. And my super random blog, which the name was like cococakecupcakes.blogspot.com. It was so long. And then put pictures up on that. And then I won a design blog. It was Swiss Miss. I don't know if you have heard of that blog. And I don't know if she's still around blogging, but she shared it. And then it just sort of got out there.
And then the orders started coming in because it wasn't Instagram, right? Or was it also an Instagram moment?
No, it wasn't Instagram. No, it was all just good old blogs. No, that was before Instagram. It got shared on the internet quite a bit, and then more people were interested in my work. So my blogs sort of became more popular, and eventually that led to some work, either doing like freelance work for other blogs or websites, and doing photography and doing some sponsored work, so that sort of thing. So it kind of, the old caterpillar was my little helper, my little buddy.
I love that. And I heard you say it, but can you describe that style of those animal cakes and how that maybe the caterpillar was the beginning of it?
Yeah, so I then sort of became known a couple of years later for my buttercream furry animal cakes, so like animal face cakes, and I call them kawaii cakes, so like very cute.
Tell us what kawaii.
Yeah, it's like a Japanese term, which just means super cute.
Love that.
So, yeah. My first book, Coco Cake Land, half of it was cute animals, half of it was like pretty buttercream piping. And so, yeah, that was what the first book was.
So Coco Cake Land was the name that you picked for your blog. It's also kind of your persona and the title of your first book. I had a couple of questions. First of all, I wanted to know where the name came from. And then I wanted you to kind of describe the Coco Cake Land aesthetic.
Oh, Coco was my first cat.
Oh,
My beloved little fluffer. Yeah, who was actually a total nut who only would really let me pet her. But actually, she was my first idea of what a cat was. And I thought all cats were that crazy and psycho. But actually, the two cats I have now are like the complete opposite, like just little cuddle, snuggly cats who are, one of them's almost more like a dog. Yeah, but I fell in love with her. She was my little fluffy ginger baby. That's where the name came from.
oh.
Coco Cake. Yeah. Coco Cake Land, the aesthetic and the vibe, I always think of colorful, fun, bright, the sense of comedy or a little bit of sense of humor in there, and fun, I guess.
So we're going to talk about how you've kind of moved with this next book towards more of a plant-based baking style or vibe. But could you describe your dessert style generally? So not only decorating, but a little more?
Yeah.
And if it has changed since your caterpillar moment?
Yes, I feel like it's really shifted and changed. I'm really casual. I really enjoy a casual bake these days. Like I love snackable bakes. Your book,
thank you.
It's so, I just love how I like something simple, like a one panner, there's a little textural element or something. Those are great. Like my cakes lately that I've been making, I don't do any orders really anymore. It's more like a friend's birthday or like my niece or nephew or my kid. But I just like to try and keep it simple and fun with maybe some natural elements, but also some piping too, but really more like free form. And I'm trying not to be so, anal retentive about my design, I guess. But I can definitely go there as well. But it's so much more relaxing this way.
So you and I are both cancer survivors, which we've actually talked about when we've seen each other. And you mentioned this fact in the intro of both of your books. And I thought that was so interesting. I'm a little bit more shy about it, or maybe worried that I don't know. I have some issues that I'm thinking I need to get over, but I so appreciate your honesty and putting it out there. And I know you've said that this is obviously, as it has mine, really influenced your life. And you say something like it's all in the attitude is sort of the way that you have dealt or the way that you deal with this fact. Can you tell us a little bit about that attitude? And I'm also interested in like the openness you have about it, or it almost feels like a need, or, like this is an important part of who I am.
I think as I was, as I was going through it, so I was diagnosed in 2015, and then I felt, I wanted to share. It was something where I was like, wow, I never thought this would happen to me, and how could I deal with it? Or I didn't want to like not share it with people that follow me, I guess. I ended up using it to help me in a way to express myself through some art stuff or creativity. And I did like a cake series around my treatment. But yeah, in a way that also feels so long ago as well. I feel so lucky to still be here. And also it's almost shocking to me that I experienced that. But I want people to know that life can change so quickly, and to really appreciate what you have, and to appreciate the people around you, practice gratitude, because anything can change at any moment.
Agree. I always think like get some gratitude in your attitude. And I also, it was long ago for me, so that I wasn't even baking. I don't know if I would have, but I didn't even have an opportunity to maybe think about it as something to share in that way. I didn't have anyone to share it with but my friends and family. And then also something to bake. Like I remember, not at the time, but later seeing the cakes that you had made. And
I mean, I don't know. I feel a little more shy about it, or don't want to talk about it as much, I guess, because it's definitely a chapter of my life, but I really love where I am now too. I had my son, and I wanted to maybe have more children, but that was not an option because of the cancer. But now I feel really happy with how things have ended up. I get to write cookbooks, I get to play music, and we get to travel as a family and do lots of fun stuff. So I feel really lucky. I feel really grateful.
More recently, plant-based baking has become an obsession. And I want to know why that happened and sort of how that happened.
20 years ago, there was no vegan treats to be seen or had that weren't tasting of, say, chalk or tasting of nothing, and I also have some really good friends who are vegan, and I love hosting. So I love entertaining. I have people over a lot. I love having parties. And I love making people feel included and making people have a blast. And food is such a way to do that. And I have had many vegetarian phases in my life as well. So I know that feeling of being at like the Chinese restaurant and 10 dishes come out. And then the last dish is like the vegetarian noodle and everyone being like, oh, see your dishes here, So I love having people over. All the food is delicious and amazing. There's no question of whether it's plant-based or not or vegan or not, because it's just all really tasty. To have everybody be included when it's cake time, especially because cakes are very important to me. So my goal, I was like, okay, I just want to develop an amazing cookbook that has all the cakes are just delicious, beautiful. They're fun. They've got like tasty elements. There's like a textural element. There's a juicy element. There's, all these great flavors, and they're really fun to look at. And they just happen to be vegan. Everybody can have a slice. I even have some gluten-free recipes too.
So Plant Cakes is your second book, and you've written it's for those who love cake, it's for plant lovers, it's for plant-forward peeps, it's for plant-curious folks, and for plant-adjacent people. I kind of know what you mean, but can you unpack who your audience is?
I mean, cake lovers, pretty obvious. You'll love cake. Plant lovers, so people who are vegan or plant-based. Plant curious would be people who, there's so much plant-based and vegan things out there right now that you throw a rock and you'll definitely find some sort of plant-based thing to eat or hear about. So it's like, oh, what is this? Plant-based. So people who are curious about learning how to bake that way. And then plant adjacent. So I always think of like my grandma when I went vegetarian at university. She's plant adjacent, or she would be vegetarian adjacent at the time, making me like vegetarian soups full of beans and stuff, and like just wanting to make something delicious for someone in your life who is vegan or plant-based. Yeah, that's what plant adjacent is.
I think also this was written about the book, but that the book provides like accessible plant-based alternatives for baking essentials, which I think is probably a lot of the time what turns people off about, I don't want to make it vegan because where am I going to find this or where am I going to find that? And I thought that was great that you were able to sort of say, here's the liquid you're going to need that's non-dairy, here's the fat you're going to need, and here are the eggs.
Yeah, everything in the book for ingredients you can find at your grocery store.
Yeah.
Even just a typical grocery store. You can go high or you can go low as far as ingredients. Like if you wanted to do an all-organic cake, you can definitely do that. Or you can go to any old grocery store and grab this can of beans or this flour, and you can still make something delicious.
I thought it might be fun to just go through sort of the three main, usually dairy products that we find in your plant-based recipes. So for butter, you like a firm, unsalted brick style for like your buttercreams for creaming into the cake batter. Is there a particular brand?
So in Canada, I use a brand called Becel, Becel. But in America, Country Crock has a good, solid, unsalted plant-based butter. I've also used Miyoko's Creamery before, but that has some cashew and coconut oil as well, so depending on nut allergies. And Violife is another one that Nicole Rucker actually mentioned, Violife to me.
And I noticed in the book you say plant-based rather than vegan for the butter. That's a choice, obviously.
I do say vegan in the book a few times, but plant-based I feel like is more friendly to all. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that makes sense, but I really wanted to feel open and like there's no judgment with this book. It's really about trying something, or if you're already vegan or plant-based, it can hopefully be your little cake treasury, So that was sort of my idea with
I love
that term.
If a recipe calls for sour cream or yogurt, let's say, I'm not sure if they do in your book or not, but if a recipe calls for sour cream or yogurt, you just would buy a vegan or plant-based sour cream or yogurt to use.
Yeah.
And are there brands of that you would recommend that we might know?
I use Tofuti brand in Canada, and I'm pretty sure that's available in America. I've heard Trader Joe's has a lot of great plant-based ingredients too. I need to make a little blast over the border to check this out. So that's what I would generally use. And then in Canada, there's a brand called Yogu for yogurt. I don't really have too many yogurty things in the book, just simply because I wasn't sure about brands as far as cross Canada, America, wherever else. So.
Yep. And then in terms of eggs, you have two things that you like to use. Aquafaba, which is the liquid from a can of chickpeas, and I love this, a.k.a. you call it bean water, which I love. And that would be 3 tablespoons of that for 1 egg. Or you like to use a mixture of baking soda and vinegar, which reminds me of, we call them wacky cakes or Depression-era cakes. Yeah. Like that's exactly how you get those cakes to rise. I wondered, with your recipes in the book, it seems like maybe you're using both the aquafaba as an egg and the baking soda method to get a little extra lift. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the paranoia. You got to get both.
Yeah. I don't think it's paranoid. I think it's brilliance.
Yeah.
We'll be right back. Today's episode is presented by California prunes, the best kind of prunes out there. I am a big fan of California prunes for 2 reasons. They're a great addition to your pantry when it comes to smart snacking and baking. You probably already know that prunes are good for your gut. You might even know that prunes are also good for your bone health. But what you really need to know is that prunes are absolutely delicious in both sweet and savory dishes. But don't just take it from me. Here's what some of the country's top culinary experts have to say. Chef Bronwyn Wyatt of Bayou St. Cake says, prunes have an earthy, winey richness that pairs beautifully with the tart, fresh flavor of berries. Chef Kat Turner from Highly Likely in LA says, they are an incredibly versatile ingredient that strike a great balance between sweet and savory. They are incredibly sensual. Ana Castro from Akamaya in New Orleans says, prunes have a sultriness to them. They are very rich and like velvet. I like to use prune puree in my baked goods to give them great flavor and also to replace some of the sugar, eggs, or fat in the recipe. It's super easy to whip up. Just blend prunes and water together and voila. For recipe ideas and more, be sure to check out the California Prunes website at californiaprunes.org. Happy baking and happy snacking. Guess what the latest issue of Cherry Bombe magazine is all about? Paris. Whether you're headed to Paris this year, dreaming of Paris, or just a Francophile at heart, you're going to love this issue. Get recommendations from She's My Cherry Pie faves like Dory Greenspan and Zoe Bakes, meet the coolest Parisians around, and learn about their restaurants, shops, bars, and bakeries, and meet some fascinating expats who changed their lives when they moved to the City of Light. Pick up an issue at cherrybombe.com or your favorite local bookstore, magazine shop, or gourmet store. Places like Space 519 in Chicago, Wild Plum Books in St. Helena, California, and Yowie in Philadelphia. You can find a complete list of retailers at cherrybombe.com. And there's a special promo for the Bombe Squad running right now. Buy the Paris issue plus any Cherry Bombe subscription and get free shipping. Just add code PARIS at checkout. Now back to our guest. So now we're going to talk about the recipe, which is a funfetti cake. It comes with vanilla buttercream, or that's how it's listed in the book, but we're going to talk about it with vanilla buttercream as well as Swiss meringue buttercream. And the cake has birthday crumbles. Yum.
Yes. I love a textural element to any of my cakes. So I'm always trying to think of how can I make something like a little textury thing on top or inside or something. Yeah.
First, can you tell us what a funfetti cake is? And then also, I believe the crumbles are inspired by Milk Bar. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about the crumbles.
For sure. So a funfetti cake, it's a vanilla cake and it's got sprinkles, rainbow sprinkles in it. So that makes it the fun part. So when you cut into it, it's like, oh my gosh, confetti inside my cake. It's a celebration. Yeah. So that's the idea behind the funfetti cake. And of course, the birthday cake crumbles. So again, I really love like a texture of some kind to a cake. And the birthday cake crumbles, I remembered from the Milk Bar cookbook, Christina Tosi's recipe. And it's basically a cookie crumble on top and it's got little sprinkles in it. But it's also, I like it just a touch salty too. So it's like sweet, salty. So after you sprinkle on whatever you need onto the cake, you maybe just like plopping that into your mouth because it's really addictive.
That's the chef's little treat. First, we're going to heat our oven to 350 degrees, and we're going to grease 3 7-inch round cake pans. And I thought this was interesting. Maybe this is not standard in America, but I feel like we're usually using 3 8-inch cake pans or 2 9. Is that a difference that in Canada they tend to be 7-inch?
No, I don't know why I did that. Yeah, I mean, I also make 8-inch or 9-inch, but generally this is just a slightly smaller cake. I mean, it still ends up being a very substantial looking cake. But I just like the height and size of this one. So you could definitely do it in 3 8x2-inch pans.
Okay.
It would just be slightly shorter. But in fact, what I actually love doing these days is I love to bake my cakes and all the recipes in plant cakes you can do this with in a baking sheet pan. I just love doing this. It's a Natasha Pickowitz from More Than Cake. I learned this from her. And you just use like a round cake ring and you punch out your shapes. And then you just build it up in 8-inch by 3 round cake pan, and then you just turn it out and then frost it that way. I don't know. I'm loving that. Yeah, it's really easy to add your syrups or your coffee milk to the layers, and it's just a fun way to build a cake.
Yeah, Natasha was a guest on the podcast, and we talked all about that. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
It's brilliant. And if you have an extra large sheet pan, you're also, or maybe even in the standard size, it's working. But it's just so much easier than having three fussy little pans. You've got one huge sheet pan. You have to buy that tool that's almost like an enormous biscuit cutter. Cut out your rounds.
Yeah.
And is there a brand of cake pan that you like?
Daddy-O's?
Yep. I have Fat Daddy-O too. To grease these pans, you say to spritz with vegetable oil. Is that like just cooking spray?
Cooking spray, or honestly, sometimes I just will use parchment paper and just like add the vegetable oil myself.
And now we're going to line those pans with parchment paper. And now we're going to take some soy milk. We're going to add a little bit of apple cider vinegar. I wondered, when you're at home, are you using metal bowls? Are you using glass bowls?
Glass.
Yep. And we're going to set that aside to sort of thicken and curdle. So we're essentially making a vegan or a plant-based buttermilk.
Yeah.
Listeners, just so you know, if you ever run out of buttermilk, you can take a cup of either cow's milk or dairy-free milk and add a tablespoon of vinegar or of lemon juice, and you have buttermilk.
I know. That was such a cool thing when I was that many years ago.
It's so great. And we're making the buttermilk as an ingredient in the cake, but it also is serving the other purposes of the leavening issue, because since we've added the vinegar, when we later add the baking soda, those two things are going to react together and help our cake to rise.
A fizzy, puffy.
Yep. Love. And I just wondered, are you using a whisk at this point to sort of mix the soy milk and the vinegar?
Yep.
And
Whisk
is there
together.
a brand or a type of whisk that you like? A balloon whisk, a skinnier whisk?
Just a small little whisk. I've got a whisk that I probably got as a bridal shower gift. So it's like 17 years old. It works great.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Now we're going to take some aquafaba.
Yeah, the liquid from a can of chickpeas. Yeah.
Exactly. And we're going to whisk the aquafaba until foamy and light, about 1 minute. And the recipe calls for about a half cup in the cake batter. How many 15-ounce cans of chickpeas is that? 15 ounces is the standard size?
Oh, yeah. Okay. I would say that's probably like half the amount of whatever's in that can.
Perfect. So we've set aside our aquafaba, and then in the bowl of a stand mixer fitted with a paddle attachment, we're going to cream together room temperature plant-based butter, a little bit of vegetable oil, granulated sugar, and we'll mix that together until it's creamy and blended. 2 questions. What speed should our mixer be on at this point? And also, I love the combination of using the plant-based butter and the vegetable oil. Was there a thought that was sort of behind using both?
I would say a medium speed for blending. And then for the vegetable oil and butter, just a real moisture blast, just keeping it really tender and moist. Yeah.
I hate a dry cake. Now we're going to add our foamy aquafaba right into the stand mixer bowl with some vanilla extract and vanilla bean paste. And 2 questions. Why both? And do you have a favorite brand?
I love just using the vanilla bean paste because I love those little flecks of vanilla, and it just adds a little extra kick of vanilla flavor. For brands, I mean, Nielsen Nasi or Rodell I use as well. I mean, there's so many great vanilla brands.
So now we're going to whisk together cake flour, baking powder, baking soda, and sea salt in a bowl. And I had a couple of questions. First, I was curious why cake flour and not all-purpose. And then I also wondered, if we didn't need the baking soda and vinegar to help lift the cake, we probably wouldn't include it in the recipe, right? I mean, I feel like in general, I feel like the cakes I make are leavened with baking powder as opposed to baking soda. I know that's not true if you're using cocoa powder, but I wondered about that choice.
As I was just saying earlier, the paranoia of just really wanting that rise to get a little bit puffy. I love that reaction of the baking soda and the vinegar, so you'll find it in a lot of these cakes. So you can actually swap out all-purpose if you wanted as well. I've done that many times. I like the fineness of the cake flour, and it's nice and light and fluffy, but honestly, I've done both, and both works.
Also, there's a great tip for making all-purpose flour into cake flour by taking a cup of flour, removing 2 tablespoons, and adding 2 tablespoons of cornstarch.
Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah, I've never tried it myself, but yeah.
Yeah, I've tried it. It works. Yeah,
awesome.
It's nice. So now we're going to have the mixer on low speed, and we're going to alternate between adding the flour and the soy milk mixture to our fat, which is in the stand mixer bowl. We'll begin and end with our flour mixture until just combined. We don't want to overmix. And then we'll use a spatula to fold in any stray bits of flour. Now we're going to gently fold in some rainbow sprinkles.
Yeah.
You say do not use natural colored sprinkles because the color won't be bright and it will dilute while baked. But are these plant-based rainbow sprinkles?
Yeah, these are from Sweet Polita. She's an amazing woman, Rosie. She started off as a baker and a blogger. She has a cookbook as well, and now she has this sprinkles empire, and she's such a lovely person. I love her sprinkles. And yes, she has a ton of vegan sprinkles as well. So I have just these big containers of the rainbow sprinkles on hand, whether I'm making a plant-based cake or a conventional cake. They're great for that recipe. They make a beautiful confetti. I will say, though, when you're mixing the sprinkles in, you want to not do too many turns because the color can start streaking. So that's why I say about 3 to 4 turns when you're folding the sprinkles in. That's very important because you can just turn the whole cake batter into like a different color at some point.
That is a great tip. Yeah, yes. I love that. So we're going to divide the batter evenly amongst the 3 prepared cake pans. We'll bake for like 22 to 25 minutes until the cake's edges are lightly browned and a toothpick comes out with a moist crumb. I love that you are a moist crumb girl. I am too. I hate a clean toothpick. Always.
Yes, you got to go moist.
Go moist or go home. Yes, cling to. Now we'll let the cakes cool and we're going to make the crumbles. So we're going to heat the oven to 300. And I actually wondered, would you start to assemble the crumbles while the cake was baking? And then when the cakes come out, kind of turn the temperature down to 300
totally
and then pop
that.
these in?
Or you can also make those, a day or 2 in advance, the crumbles, and just store them at room temp. Yeah.
So we're going to heat the oven to 300, line a baking sheet with parchment paper. Do you have a brand of baking sheets that you're partial to?
Whatever they sell at Costco. Also, if you have a soul cat, that would be a great usage too.
Then we're going to combine granulated sugar, brown sugar, cake flour, baking powder, salt, sprinkles in a medium bowl. And are we whisking this all together?
Yeah, just a quick little combine. So yeah, a little whisk is good. Yeah.
Awesome. So I had a couple of questions. I wanted to know why we're using 2 different kinds of sugar. I wanted to know if we could use all-purpose flour here instead. And you've already said that you can substitute all-purpose for the cake.
I guess flavor-wise, the brown sugar. And then, of course, white sugar will make it like nice and crispy too. And the flour, you can use either.
So now we're going to add some vegetable oil to this mixture. Is there a type of oil like canola or this? Or...
Yeah, just canola oil.
Okay. Yeah, great. So we add vegetable oil, vanilla extract. We'll mix until kind of small clumps of crumble form. We'll spread those evenly on our prepared baking sheet, bake for about 15 to 20 minutes until lightly browned and baked through. And then we'll cool completely before using, but break up any large pieces. I imagine some of them kind of stick together or bake into something
form
larger.
Like a larger cookie.
Is a cake crumble more like a cake batter or a cookie batter?
It's more like a cookie.
Yeah,
like a crispy cookie.
Now we're going to make our buttercream, and I thought we'd walk through both ways just because the traditional is pretty easy. We'll do that one first. When you make this sort of plant-based traditional buttercream, does the flavor taste like traditional not plant-based buttercream? Is there a difference?
I don't think it tastes any different than
Isn't that amazing?
Dairy buttercream.
Yeah. I love that. So for the traditional buttercream, in the bowl of a stand mixer fitted with a paddle attachment, we're going to pulse together, maybe on a low speed.
Yeah. Well, I do kind of pulse. I just go with my...
I like that.
My own personal pulse style.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. So peeps, we are pulsing with our stand mixers. You didn't know you could, but Lyndsay has shared that we actually can.
And you need to do that sound effect.
So we're going to pulse together room temperature plant-based butter, icing sugar, which we usually call confectioner sugar or powdered sugar, vanilla extract, salt, and we're going to gently combine that in the stand mixer because we don't want it to cause this crazy dust storm of powdered sugar flying everywhere. And then once combined, we'll increase the mixer to high speed and we'll beat until the frosting is fluffy and creamy, another 1 to 2 minutes. I noticed that in the book, you have us creaming the butter first and then adding the dry ingredients. Does it matter? Can we just kind of do it all at the same time?
I think doing it all at the same time. That's kind of why I wrote that for you specifically, because I was like, what do I actually do? I mean, you certainly can cream the butter first, but I mean, if you do the pulsing thing, just so you're not creating that dust storm, I throw it all in. Another thing I do is I'll just do like a very lightly damp tea towel, and you can put that over top of your mixer too to stop it from any dusty times. So
next, we are going to talk about the Swiss meringue buttercream, plant-based. So we're going to first make sure our stand mixer bowl is super clean and grease-free, which surprised me, just like we need
like
to
any
do
meringue.
with egg whites, when making meringue. And we need to do that because if there's any grease, it will preclude the egg whites from getting as fluffy and big and voluminous. And then I loved this tip, which I had never read. You actually use some lemon juice to degrease the bowl and the whisk. Do you do that every time, or is that just...
I mean, again, it's like a precautionary thing. If you really want to ensure that that is grease-free, you can do that and then just wipe it out again.
Yep. I thought this was interesting. In the book, you talk about how to reduce aquafaba, which is, again, as you say, for all of these little tips, like it's just extra insurance. But my question to you is, are you reducing every time? We're going to talk about how to reduce, but is that something you do every time? Is it important for newbie, like peeps who have never made a plant-based Swiss meringue buttercream with aquafaba, like, please reduce, you will have better luck?
I think so. I think it's a newbie thing. Like if you are trying this out, and for me at this point now, I do that sometimes still, but I'll also now just crack open my can of chickpeas, put a strainer on top of a bowl, dump it out, and I'll start from that liquid as well. I feel like it's also dependent on the chickpea brand, or like I know that the one I use will work for me, but I'm not sure the consistency of other brands because there's so many different brands. So I think also that may be a good tip or help for if you're using a brand that I'm not familiar with, that reducing it down, just getting some of that water content out will be helpful for you.
So we're going to strain the liquid from a can of chickpeas, and we're going to place it over medium-high heat in a small saucepan. In this instance, it doesn't really matter because we're cooking it, but in general, do we want our aquafaba, our bean water, to be room temperature when we're using it?
Yeah, no, it hasn't made a difference for me.
Okay, good to know. So we're going to strain the liquid from the can over medium-high heat in a small saucepan, bring it to a low boil. Then we'll reduce the heat and simmer till it's reduced by half, about 15 minutes. We're going to add some granulated sugar and chill that overnight so it kind of gels. When we use it the next day, we don't have to bring it to room temp. We can use it just like that.
I've just used it as is, yeah.
Great. Then with the whisk attachment in a stand mixer on low speed, we're going to whisk the aquafaba. Now we're back to our Swiss meringue buttercream steps. So we reduced our aquafaba. That's our ingredient. With the whisk attachment in the stand mixer on low speed, we're going to whisk the aquafaba with cream of tartar until slightly frothy, about 3 minutes. Then with the mixer on high speed, we'll keep mixing until soft peaks form, again, about another 3 minutes. And if we did not reduce the aquafaba, we're now adding some granulated sugar as well as powdered. And we're going to add the sugars a tablespoon at a time until the meringue has thickened and reached medium stiff peaks, which can take up to 15 minutes, you said. But I love this. Well, first of all, you have us test it. You know, if you turn off the mixer and lift the head or remove the whisk, the meringue should hold thickly to the whisk. Are we not looking for a stiff peak at the top?
So I have never achieved the ultra thick stiff peak that I have achieved with an egg white, but I have made buttercream with even like a medium peak of aquafaba and it still works. I aim for medium stiff. So like stiff enough that when you lift the head up, it's attached, but it's not going to be as thick as a traditional like egg white meringue, not as pointy and like quite as thick and sticky, but still holds its shape.
So basically, if we go about 15 minutes and it's kind of holding on to the whisk, we're good to go.
Yeah, and it could take you shorter than 15 as well.
Okay.
So, yeah, I would say anywhere between 8 and 15, depending.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now with the mixer on low speed and with the paddle attachment, we're going to add our unsalted room temp plant butter, about 1 inch of a piece at a time, kind of like about a tablespoon each.
Yeah, I'd say that.
Yeah.
Or like a 1 inch cube.
And you say, I love this, that you just have your like kitchen knife or a butter knife and you're just kind of slicing it off and throwing it in.
Slice and go. I don't prep my butter.
Once all the plant-based butter is added, we're going to turn the mixer to medium-high and whip until the mixture forms into a thick, creamy buttercream. We'll add our vanilla extract and paste, a pinch of salt, and incorporate for about 30 seconds. I also wanted to mention for people, because I have never heard of this product and I was very curious, if you do not want to do this aquafaba situation, you can buy something called Versa Whip. Can you tell us about Versa Whip and is it easy to find?
Versa Whip you can find online at a large retailer and probably at some cooking specialty stores. So this is something that when I was doing all my testing for vegan Swiss meringue buttercream, a fellow cake baker, I had messaged her being like, what do you do with all your extra chickpeas, or you're doing all these vegan cakes so much? And she was like, actually, I use this really cool product called VersaWhip. And I was like, whoa, cool. So I checked it out, and it makes foam. So in fact, I was watching like an old Top Chef episode with my kid, Teddy. He loves Top Chef right now. And they mentioned VersaWhip. This is like some old 10 years ago episode. I'm like, what? So I think that's where it came from. And so it will whip up just like a meringue, and you can use it in the same way.
So now we'll fill and frost our cake layers. We'll sprinkle the top of the cake liberally with our cake crumbles. And I love the way you do it in the book. You sort of just make like sort of a pile on top.
Yes.
And then sort of sprinkle some more funfetti rainbow sprinkles over everything.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for chatting with me today, Lyndsay. And I just want to
pleasure.
say that you are my cherry pie.
Oh, thank you, Jessie.
That's it for today's show. Thank you to Nonino and California Prunes for supporting this episode. Don't forget to subscribe to She's My Cherry Pie on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen, and tell your baking pals about us. Visit cherrybombe.com for today's recipe. She's My Cherry Pie is a production of the Cherry Bombe Podcast Network and is recorded at CityVox Studio in Manhattan. Our producers are Kerry Diamond, Catherine Baker, and Elizabeth Vogt. Our associate producer is Jenna Sadhu, and our content and partnerships manager is Londyn Crenshaw. Thank you so much for listening to She's My Cherry Pie, and happy baking!